Yo, I'm Bob, totally blind since birth, in the Marvel, talking about X-Men, the animated series, episodes 7 and 8, Slave Island and the Unstoppable Juggernaut. So Slave Island premiered on February 13th in 1993, and Unstoppable Juggernaut premiered on March 6th in 1993. I would see these entirely out of order when watching them for the first time. You took the VHS tapes where you could find them. They were in very high demand. I think I actually bought The Cure and Come the Apocalypse before these two. So even though I knew that Gambit, Storm, and Jubilee were going to make it out okay, I'd already seen Cold Vengeance, I couldn't wait to see these two episodes. So the episode begins with Jubilee gasping herself awake in a prison cell, and it is undoubtedly like waking up into a wide-awake nightmare, because all the mutants are viewed by the human beings who have captured them as property rather than equals. They are, well, slaves in this episode. They are charged with building a dam to power Master Mold, and this is going to, in turn, release other Sentinels so other mutants can be brought to Genosha. And I think this is a precursor to the termination camps that Bishop mentions in Days of Future Past Part 1. I do believe we see those in a flashback, where we probably don't see a lot because this is a kid show. This was a kid show in the 90s, but I've always thought that Genosha was a precursor to those camps that Bishop talks about later in Season 1. Storm spending most of the episode in the box must have been quite a hardship for her. I think when Jubilee finally gets thrown into one of those, maybe it's in the same one as Storm. Storm sounds very much exhausted. I doubt she slept very much in there. So the mutants have all got these glowing collars on, which have been invented by a scientist from Scotland. So I like that they're setting things up for the Cure and Come the Apocalypse in this episode, because that's, of course, Dr. Adler, who will kind of meet in the Cure. So yeah, if the mutants try to take their collars off, they'll explode and destroy them. They can't say the K word because this was a Marvel 90s cartoon and couldn't get away with that back in the day. So yeah, Storm's got to spend most of the episode in the box, and Jubilee has to try to come up with an escape plan on her own. She's trying to get Gambit in on it, but he's coming up with a plan on his own. I like how the writers are attempting to make us question where his loyalties lie. I think this is another thing that they were setting up for Days of Future Past Parts 1 and 2. You know, Gambit supposedly betraying the mutants in this episode is certainly going to come into play when we meet Bishop in a couple episodes. So that's going on. I wish I could have seen this episode in chronological order. There was that scene when all the other X-Men leave the mansion and Xavier makes that phone call to Moira McTaggart on Muir Island, and I would have loved to have seen it the way everyone else probably did see it. You know, I would have thought, oh, where's this guy going? What's he up to? Who's Moira McTaggart? I hadn't read the comics, so I wouldn't have known that. Yeah, you've got him getting out of there, and good thing, too. So, Cable was probably my favorite part of this episode. Right when the episode starts, he's blowing stuff up right and left. I don't think we see him right away. We just see the results of his big plasma rifle there. And, you know, the mutants are told to go back to their cells, and the leader in his creepy voice, he's like, I have decided there will be no more work for today. And then, you know, throughout the episode, he's like, remember, your leader loves you. Yeah, I would have come up with an escape plan even sooner. That is one creepy voiced dude. I would not have wanted to stay there any longer than I had to, so good for Gambit and Jubilee coming up with their own escape plans. So Gambit, of course, he does manage to break free of the guards, and that is when we get to see Cable showing up. I would imagine he looks pretty cool in this episode. I know I instantly wanted his action figure when his plasma rifle was described. Just a really interesting character. I didn't know he was a time traveler when I first saw Season 1. I think the bad guys, the leader, Gyrick and Trask, they thought Cable was a, how'd they put it, a mercenary who threw his wages back in the leader's face and took to the hills to start a revolution, you know. And, I mean, yeah, I had no idea he was a time traveler. And I wouldn't find that out until season 2, watching Time Fugitives, parts 1 and 2. So that was an interesting revelation. So the battle at the end of the episode was everything I hoped it would be. We get to see mutants like the Blob. He's doing his thing. Storm is out of the box, and she is pissed. She just starts making one of the biggest storms I'm sure Genosha has seen. And, you know, when Master Mold shows back up in the final decision, and he's kind of holding a grudge against Trask and Gyrick. Well, I guess I know why. They leave him plugged in. They're going to hightail it back to Washington. I mean, they eventually do pick him up. But there's that one scene where he's got that cable connected to whatever outlet, and he's like, I am still plugged in. Dads, won't you help me? What are you leaving me here for? So he's just kind of standing around, and yeah, that would probably give me daddy issues too. So he's quite furious with them by the time we see him again at the end of season 1. So when Cable shows up and goes to town on the Sentinels, and the massive wave from Storm shows up and just washes everybody away. I love how Cable just chuckles when Cameron Hodge, who we'll see again in season 5, he's about to fire on Cable. He's just like, I can time flip out of here, and you guys, well, you're pretty much goners. So that's exactly, I guess that's what he does. We don't see the leader again. Cameron lost his leg, apparently, as we find out in season 5 when we see him again. But we don't hear about the leader after season 1. I don't think he's the same leader from the Hulk at all. This is a different guy entirely, I'm guessing. I love how the episode ends when they get on the Blackbird there. And Storm's okay. She had a claustrophobia dream. And then they show up at the X-Mansion only to find it destroyed. And we get things set up for the Unstoppable Juggernaut. Unstoppable Juggernaut has to be, well, it's a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day episode for Colossus. I mean, this guy, as Wolverine says, he's always in the wrong place at the wrong time. He just came over to America to find his sister. I don't know what in the world she was doing over in America, but he did apparently find her at some point, and they went back to Russia. He's trying to, you know, do his job. He's trying to get paid, and things aren't going right for him. Meanwhile, the X-Men are trying to find Xavier, and we do learn that he survives. Well, if you saw it in chronological order, I'm sure that was a relief. I already knew that he survived because I'd seen The Cure and Come the Apocalypse, but they do get that little message from him when they get back to the mansion. So one of the things that really interests me is, where's Remy? Where's Gambit in this episode? He's at the end of Slave Island, and when everybody gets off of the Blackbird, he's not in this episode at all. Maybe the Beyonder sucked him up, and he's teaching Gambit how to make interesting Cajun Christmas food. Maybe he's gone back to New Salem Mall. Maybe he's making out with Card Shop Lady there. I don't know. But he's not in this episode at all, as the other X-Men are looking for whoever, Juggernaut, destroyed the X-Mansion. And I love how Colossus he's managing to be polite, even though somebody tries to do him in with a big piece of construction equipment. He's fine, of course, because he can turn himself into metal. Then he goes to the bank and he tries to open an account, but he gets framed for Juggernaut stealing the money, so he's in jail. But I love how Beast is his cellmate. That's a really cool scene, and we learn that Beast is a cookie fiend. And yeah, Rogue and Storm break him out. We eventually get to see the Juggernaut for the first time. I love this guy. So when I watched the episode for the first time, I hadn't seen Enter Magneto yet. So I had no idea that Juggernaut and Charles were stepbrothers. Juggernaut mentions his brother in the episode at one point when he's like, "Didn't my brother tell you it's no use?" Or it's actually my worthless brother, when he's talking there, as they're all trying to stop him. So, I mean, what a cool fight scene with Colossus and Juggernaut. I think they actually pay homage to that in Deadpool 2. So when they eventually stop the Juggernaut and Rogue starts to take his powers. I guess we actually got to see something in terms of visual flashbacks. That must have been when everybody else found out that Xavier and Juggernaut were stepbrothers. Rogue does say the word Charles, but since, I wouldn't have seen Inner Magneto by the time I'd watched this one for the first time, I had no idea who she was talking about. I actually thought she just grunted at that particular point in time. So I wouldn't find out about Charles and Juggernaut being stepbrothers until I actually watched Inner Magneto for the first time. And then I was like, oh, I get it now. Okay. Because remember, no visual clues, no audio description tracks in these older episodes. I don't even know if she sees anything like flashes as she's taking Juggernaut's powers. And of course, it's difficult for her because, as he says in the episode, my powers are magical. So, they come from the gem of Cedric, and this is not doing Rogue any favors, but everything ends okay. Juggernaut's apparently thinking he's partied too hard, and he goes off in a daze somewhere. I love the end of the episode, though. And Colossus, even though things have kind of turned out horribly for him, he stays and helps the X-Men rebuild their school. Just the kind of guy Colossus is, I guess. Pretty nice guy. I mean, even though humans judged Colossus by where he was from, even though they judged him for looking different, he still fought through that situation and wound up making some friends by the end of the episode. So I like this one pretty well. I think I liked Slave Island a little better than Unstoppable Juggernaut, but the Revelation scene there was... I imagine that was a pretty interesting scene there at the end of that episode. If they did give you guys visual flashbacks to a younger Charles and Kane. I don't know if they did or not. Somebody tell me in the comments section. That'll do for this Marvel episode review. Next time we're going to be talking about The Cure and Come the Apocalypse. Two of my favorite episodes of all time because they feature Apocalypse. So yeah, I'm a big Apocalypse fan. Till next time, true believers.